Now, I have two interesting things I want to share and also discuss with you guys. Now, one of the things, see if you guys can agree with me. Let's say if someone comes from, let's say, the US to China to do a survey on religion. And it depends on the result you're going to get, depends on how you ask the questions, right? If you go on the street and just start asking people, are you religious? I think you might get a lot of no's, because I think Chinese people's understanding of the term religious has its specific structure. Now, if you ask them, do you have a faith? Or do you believe in the existence of God? Or do you believe in the Buddha? I think you'll get different answers. When you ask, say, a Chinese person, are you religious? They will think.
If I could comment on that, actually.
Just 1 second. They will think that you're asking them if they go to the church, if they believe, if they, participate in Bible group study. That there's very more rigid understanding of definition of religious. But if you ask them, do you think the Buddha exists? Or do you think God exists? They a lot more will say, I believe so. And then if you ask them, similar question, but on the flip side, do you not believe? Or do you think that there is no God? Or do you think there's no Buddha in this world? I think you'll get a higher percentage of people saying, well, I think, it's harder to deny them.
And that's called...
Yeah.
No, if you don't believe in God at all, that's atheist.
Right.
If you say, I'm not sure, I don't know, that's called agnostic. The word is agnostic. Jason, what were you going to say?
Sorry.
Well, actually, the way that I was looking at some of the statistics about Taoism and how they tabulate who a Taoist is. And according to Taoism, the really hardcore system is you actually have to be a practicing Taoist monk or priest to be counted as a Taoist. But we all know from living in China that there are tens of millions, if not more, people who are practitioners of Taoism, who go to Taoist temples, who pray before various Taoist gods. So the way that it's tabulated and in a lot of data and graphs in the West is an inaccurate representation of what life in China is actually like.
That's a really good point, because let's say there are a lot of people who practice Buddhism here in China. But you don't, maybe some get a certificate. Like you go to a temple and they'll give you some kind of, I don't know, actually.
Well, yeah, my wife actually has one of those.
Yeah, I guess that's for people who are, seriously practicing, learning about this religion. But for a lot of people.
My mother-in-law.
She has one? Okay. But for me, I study. I try to study Buddhism and I read my scriptures morning and night, but I don't have a badge or a certificate. So if you ask me, are you a Buddhist? I'm like, I'll be like, I don't know if I count as a Buddhist, or if you ask, are you a Taoist? I mean, I might be studying or practicing certain Taoist practices, but I don't have a badge or title. So it depends on how you do the survey. Yeah.
Yes, Beibei. And what I want to do is I want to say this word. I want to throw the word in for you here, which is to say spiritual practices.
Yes.
So it's the difference between are you specifically engaged into and committed into a specific religion? The answer might be no, I'm not. However, I am spiritual, or I have spiritual practices, or I accept that I believe in the spiritual or you can call it spiritual or divine nature of life. And so I'm saying I believe in God. I'm a bit general about it. By the way, I'm not a good Catholic.
Okay, I'm not going to ask the details.
I don't go to
right. I don't go to church. I don't regularly practice the full Catholic faith, but I don't throw it out the window and reject it either, right? So I accept the idea of the spiritual and the divine principles, fine. But it's like this what you're saying though. So do I?
Right.
I don't practice my Catholicism that much actually, but I guess I'm still Catholic. Yes. I'm just not a good one. I mean, you don't need to have these conversations with people. It can get there's a lot of muddy water here.
Right. And so, I mean, I just the other day, I think I read in the news that there is a rise in the popularity of young people practicing Buddhism here in China because they're so stressed out by modern life. So a lot more are going to temples, to pray just to calm down. And I know more and more friends who are starting to have some sorts of spiritual practice. Maybe they don't go to church every day, but there's a lot of things you can do to help support your spiritual growth.
Nothing to do with religion.
Right. So
That's right.
It depends on how you ask, how you do the survey, ask the questions, and how do you define religious freedom. I can sit here and think about God, and nobody will say anything, right?
Now the thing is, baby, that what you and we're saying. So, what is the degree to which people in China are practicing their religions, and they're certainly allowed to? That this is a rational adult discussion. So when the United States government comes along and says, "Oh no, not only are people not practicing religion in China, but China is evil," the government to this day violently oppressing people practicing faiths of all faiths and religions. When you read that, they're not just, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the Uyghurs. They're genociding the Uyghurs. This is ugly, sick stuff. And it's very difficult for me because I'm an American. I'm not anti-American when I say it, but when I see something that's so morally gross and incorrect, and then they use it, they politicize it to demonize China, when in fact the reality is, and whenever I do an interview, I say this, when in fact the reality is this: China is now the largest, safe, stable, successful, capable, peaceful, and civil country on the planet. I always say that during my interviews. And that's a mouthful, and it's the truth. Okay. Do you realize, going back to the positive things, which is that China has just blossomed incredibly over these 30 years, especially 20 years. But let's go back and remember that it actually, if we go back to the last time China was involved in a war, not started a war, and that was Vietnam, and that was the mid-1970s. So it has been China's rise to super world power with so much influence, and that's a whole nother discussion, has been peaceful for almost half a century. China hasn't started a war or attacked any other country in almost half a century. And then I have to listen to these damn U.S. politicians say China is a threat. China is evil. The country that hasn't started a war or attacked any other country in a half a century is the evil threat? No, you're the evil threat. And then they just project this out onto China. It's disgusting.
Hello.